Welcome! My name is Sarah Rice, and my art name is Chittercat Studios. In my senior show, I wanted to share a little bit about my walk with God to show people how a testimony is not one moment, but a slow process of learning God. Full stories will be told on my YouTube channel, but here is an overview. Enjoy! Chapter 1, God as Default. Here are 6 panels to demonstrate the story of a recurring nightmare I had growing up. In the nightmare, I was a princess in a castle. I knew God was my father, but I did not know him. I lived under the protection of the castle, but one day a stranger invited me to go to the tree that I had watched from the window. He had a strange beauty that intrigued me, and I followed. I grew more scared as we got further from the castle, the fire starting to rise around us. He comforted me, but when I realized the danger I was in, it was too late and I could not escape. He had me create a place in the tree, never forcing my hand. But I obeyed, thinking I didn't have any other choice. I knew I was going to die in that tree, and there was no escape. I called to my father knowing I needed him. It wasn't until I was older and realized that even before I knew God, I had yearned for the castle, which is heaven, as though I had lived there before, but had been stuck in the tree, which was sin or hell. Chapter 2, God as Mine. When I was little, I was a very selfish child. As the youngest, I felt as though I had to share everything. I wanted something that was mine, that no one could take from me. One day in church, from the pulpit, my dad, we were missionaries in Mexico, started talking about accepting Jesus, and my mom was quietly translating into my ear. What he said made sense, but I held it in my heart until I got home. I had heard the verse about it being better to pray in your closet, and I took it literally. In my closet, I prayed the sinner's prayer and finally felt safe. It felt like I had been trapped before and had finally come home. Even better, it felt like he was part of me, like there was no way anyone could take him from me. It felt so true and real that when my parents found out many weeks later, I laughed and asked, "How could you not know?" 'Cause to me, the world had changed, and it hadn't occurred to me to tell anyone the obvious. Chapter 3, God as Feared. It was the summer before college. I had grown up knowing God as my protector, father, and friend. However, at a special camp called Summit in Colorado, I learned a new side of him. During worship, I heard God telling me to throw my hands up in praise. It was such a small thing, but my social anxiety gripped me, and I began to panic thinking about everyone around me. He gently told me again, but all I could answer was that I was too scared. After more back and forth, I was in tears and shaking when it happened. I could have sworn it was audible, though no one else seemed to hear it. A thundering roar that made my knees buckle and bones shiver, and I knew what he was trying to tell me. How dare you fear anything but me when I am protecting you? And I lifted my hands in praise. Understand, I am not cured of my anxiety or fear. I have to remind myself of that roar to know that I should not fear anyone but God. Chapter 4, God as Accepting. From the last story, you know I always struggle with anxiety. But when I went to college, something worse began to plague me. I don't know what started it, but I began to become more and more depressed. Understand that if anxiety is like being aware of every little thing around you until you are overwhelmed, depression is more inward, like knots being tightened around your heart, a force field that hardens to joy, but becomes more sensitive to sadness. Growing up, I always felt that God used me through my happiness, so having that stripped from me made me feel useless. I chose to show this through the back of the canvas, the side you were never meant to see. I only presented the perfected happiness for God to use, but He slowly taught me that He wanted to use every part of me, including the broken, tangled, and ugly sides. This is important because most Christians only share their pain after it has been cured. but I included this unfinished chapter so you know you aren't a bad Christian if you are still broken. God will heal you and is healing you, but don't wait until after you have been healed to share your journey. Chapter 5. God as Partner. Getting into a relationship with my now husband allowed me to understand a side of God that I hadn't known before. God had protected me and been a father to me, but I began to understand God's love from a relationship standpoint. My dad was always very patient, and I knew that if I needed to do something first, Dad would wait and be there when I was done. But God's love is more. When I was in a relationship with my now husband, I was always desperate and longing to be around him. I didn't just want dates or phone calls. I wanted to be around him every second I could. God showed me his love is the same. He was always desperate and jealous for my time. He wanted me for more than devotionals in church. He wanted to be with me every second and for my religion to become a relationship. I depicted this with my wedding day because my relationship with my now husband brought me closer to God, and God can hang out with us every day until the church becomes his bride.